Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Vila Bianca.
I'm Eric Murphy.
This is Skeptic Generation.
And we need to talk.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, V, how's it going?
This week was rough and continues to be rough, just globally. So we are maybe a little bit solemn this morning, but also ready to take calls, ready to talk to people. So you guys, listen up. We have open lines. A lot of people end up calling in like half an hour to an hour from now, which means that we have to run through a lot of callers and not get to everybody. So if you would like to talk with us today, feel free to call the show at 585-526-8774 or use your computer by going to the link tiny.cc/callSG, capital S, capital G. Our call screeners are standing by and ready to take your call. If you are a troll or somebody who is calling in under false pretenses to be a bigot, you will not get through. We know who you are. All right, Eric.
Not naming any names here.
No naming any names, but there have been pests,
yeah.
let's say. And these pests do not get access to us because we only want to talk to honest interlocutors.
We try our best. We try our best.
Speaking of, we are doing a fun thing, which is Eric is going to go on a little bit of a, not a rant, but an exploratory kind of monologue.
Yeah, so we read the comments, not always, but we try to.
But we do.
I mean, we want to get a feel for how things are going at the show and maybe what people are taking from it. And every once in a while, I'll see a comment that is just confusing. And I thought, you know what? I get it. I actually took some notes here. It can be confusing because we haven't talked about, why we do certain things certain ways. There are some kind of unspoken rules that we've abided by, and V and I haven't talked about all of them, but I definitely have views that I abide by. And I figured we should take a minute to talk about it. So the comment that kind of really got me on it was this last week. I saw a comment that said, "I'm a little surprised that this was Eric's first exposure to someone who believes in God, yet believes that religion is something developed by humans. I feel like this is a common conclusion among people." So there's that kind of comment. There are comments of people saying, well, you're never going to convince this caller. Why are you still talking to them? You should have hung up on them immediately. Or how come you didn't defend this egregious thing that they said? And I kind of want to take a minute. So really quickly, I want to give you a few of the oughts that we do when we're trying to do the show, because it matches with our goals for the show. So the first thing is that when somebody calls in, we pretend that call, or at least I do my best to pretend that call is the very first time that somebody watching is watching, the very first video somebody has seen on this channel. So if someone's calling in and they want to continue a conversation, I want to make sure that we revisit what was said before. That way people don't have to try and backtrack and figure out what it was. Or if someone is brand new to being a skeptic, that we're not trying to lean on ideas that we've established 6 months ago. So that's the first. So if it seems like, I've got the memory of a goldfish, I do, but also as a host for the show, that's on purpose. Number two, the topic is more important than the caller. If a caller is not going to be convinced, that's fine. What we want people to engage with the subject matter. And so if somebody, it turns out they're just stubborn, pig-headed, whatever the case is, that doesn't mean that we should hang up on them, because it's not about us trying to convince that caller. It's about having these conversations so that you watching can engage with these topics, with these subjects, and see how these conversations are had out.
Yeah, because the hope is that you guys are able to kind of take some of these notes into your real life conversations, and it's really difficult to hang up on or mute somebody who is actually sitting across from you.
Yeah, although I did see a comment at one point, somebody was like, "You're muted in real life," and that just...
Oh, no.
Ooh. The third is we pick our battles. If somebody is gish galloping, and gish galloping would be, bringing up way more subjects, way more wrong things than we would have time to respond to, then as hosts, we're doing our best to figure out which of those things we want to take and go with. And so yeah, we're not going to get to all of them. And if we didn't get to the thing that you don't like, hopefully you watch enough that we will, maybe on another call. But if we're trying to follow the thread and someone is throwing out chaff, we're not going to get to them all. We're picking our battles. So if you're like, Eric didn't talk about the one thing that I picked a different battle. You picked a different battle. And that's honestly what you're going to have to do when you have these discussions too. Otherwise, it's just going to go everywhere and the conversation will be useless.
Or there's going to be situations where you can have a different conversation if you pick a different thing to focus on. But if everybody goes for, well, what, God, you're going to have the same conversation over and over and over and over again. And that's not good, channel content. And that's not good for real life intellectual stimulation. So,
oh gosh, that's one of my, I hate that one so much.
It's so annoying.
Where, I believe in God. Well, which God?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we get it. But why? Are you like hoping to have your personal mic drop moment? Like, it doesn't work. But speaking of confusion, we're almost done here. But we try to summarize why the call is important. In the case of that comment that I showed, I'll put it back on the screen, this one right here. I'm surprised that it was Eric's first exposure. It wasn't. But at the same time, we had talked about multiple things in that call. And without the summary of, hey, here's why it can be important, you have issues. And as people who have maybe been in this for longer, we take for granted a lot of work that we've done already that not everybody's done. So if somebody calls in and wants to talk about a first mover or a watchmaker or a violinist or the primacy of logic, I mean, all of these different things may sound like they have absolutely nothing to do with skepticism and religion. It sounds and can often be just, philosophical navel gazing, but it is tied to something. When somebody calls in and wants to talk about violinists, what they're really wanting to talk about, I don't want to get demonetized, it rhymes with schmishmortion, that we take for granted that everyone's heard it before. If somebody says, I want to talk about a watchmaker, what they're talking about is what they think is evidence of a God that created the universe. And the watchmaker is a common analogy for that. Same with first movers, same with, logical primacy. I try to summarize, and V does as well, we try to summarize during the call what it's about, because if we don't, and you just hear us arguing about watchmakers and you have no idea what we're on about, you're not going to get anything out of this. And we want this show to be useful for that.
Yeah.
And then finally, we want to be honest interlocutors, even if we're the only ones. If somebody is trying to set a trap, the best thing I think we should do is try in good faith to not, to how do I explain this?
Well, I think that there's a difference between being an honest interlocutor and allowing a script, right? So there's that balance of being, hey, I want to have a real conversation with you. This is something that I find important. This is something that I think other people can benefit listening to. And then there's being able to navigate that role with, okay, this person very clearly is not going to be engaging honestly. So what can we glean from this conversation to salvage it, to make it useful, to make it interesting, without just, kind of plodding along and following their script.
But if somebody lets slip to us something that indicates to us that they're on a script, that doesn't mean that the thousands and thousands of people watching get it.
Right.
And so when we jump on it, we just look like assholes. And it's lazy. And I think that even though it may seem more tedious and there are less mic drop moments, it's the kind of discourse that I want people to have. It's the kind that I want to see more of in our community. And so that's what we're going to do our best to exemplify.
There's a again, a delicate balance between having a mic drop moment and just throwing the mic around.
Yes, that is yes, absolutely. And finally, this obviously, if you've followed us, and goodness knows if you followed me, I have made every one of those mistakes many times, and I will make those mistakes in the future, but I'm doing my best to avoid them where I can. These kinds of rules that we are following are ones that are specific to the show, and are based off of experience. And that is what we're going forward with. So don't think that, Eric's high and mighty, he's just dictating these rules. No, he's just trying to learn from his mistakes. So that's my little rant. I just figured that a lot of that has been unsaid and implied, and I figured that maybe this will get rid of a little bit of confusion.
Yeah, I mean, this show is growing into its own thing, and as we decide on what the rules are or are not, it's helpful to point those out.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might be reading other comments and reacting when you are co-hosting.
Yeah, if it gets me kind of on a tear like this has, then yeah, absolutely. But
leave your most obnoxious comments on this episode.
Oh, no. It helps. You know what? It's engagement. That's fine.
There you go.
We do have a couple of other quick announcements before we dive into things, though.
Yeah.
This Wednesday.
Yes, so this Wednesday, we were supposed to do our Versus episode. Last Wednesday, we did not because the weather was really bad and it was messing with our internet connection. So we moved it to this Wednesday. So this Wednesday, which is, I believe, March 2nd, we are going to be hosting Versus.
Yeah, and that is where we actually make ourselves drinks. I'm going to be making a gin and tonic, and you're going to have, what are you going to have?
We'll see how much whiskey's left over. But yeah, if you are interested in seeing us have the kind of conversation that Eric just described and really engaging with that, feel free to tune in. Everything that we make through that show and also through this one are going directly to trying to hire a producer, get an editing rig, and really step up our game. If you are interested in talking with us or asking us a question, but you do not want to call the show because that can be intimidating, feel free to drop us a super chat. We read all of them at the end of the episode, and it's a good way to have your 2 seconds, your 2 cents thrown in there. And yeah.
Yeah, and as always, the show is brought to you by you. It is your support that keeps us going. It's just us. We're not part of a larger organization. We're doing our absolute best. We have some incredible volunteers who are helping with our social media and call screening, but when it comes to producing this show, doing that stuff, it's just us. If you like what we do and you want to support us, or you really don't care but you're tired of the ads, there's an ad-free version of this video, there's an ad-free version of our podcast, and you can get those by going to patreon.com/Skeptic Generation. That's patreon.com/Skeptic Generation. We sincerely appreciate the support. And if you didn't know that we had a podcast, hey everybody, we have a podcast. It's been growing. I think it doubled in viewership in the last 2 weeks. And that's really awesome. If you want to see the show or want to hear the show but don't have time, you can listen to it on your drive to work. Skeptic Generation is on every podcast aggregator, and every episode back to episode 1 is on there. So yeah. All
right. We have been talking a lot and not
Holy
with
moly.
you. So let's talk with some callers. If you do have thoughts, questions, deeply held beliefs, do call in. Let's talk with David in North Carolina first. Oh, my goodness. David is calling in about comparative world religion and Sam Harris, I believe. David, welcome to the show.
Hi, V. Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Specifically, I'm tossing out the issue. I've been watching a lot of Sam Harris, and I find myself agreeing with much of what he says to a large extent, but then grinding my teeth at other things where I won't say grinding my teeth, not heavily so, but I don't feel like he's honest with his audience a lot. I think he makes the choice to push what he thinks will work best. But that aside, that's a personal opinion. He makes a lot of attacks on Abrahamic religion, and there's a lot of pushback because he places that all on Islam, and I do not see the difference that makes Islam more dangerous than Christianity with its divine right or its mandate to tame the earth and convert by the sword, or even Judaism. I think his arguments about mitigating on Judaism because it then rational stage for like 1,000 years.
Yeah.
I think that you split hairs to try to say that Islam is more susceptible to this Abrahamic violence than the other two branches.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of different facets here, and I've talked about this before on Miracles and Atheists podcast. I actually shocked the Christian hosts by agreeing that Sam Harris is not the best representation of atheism, in my opinion. So I agree with you that I don't think he is being honest a lot of the time in his engagement, and I also do think that a lot of his rhetoric borders on really problematic stereotypes about all Muslims, right, and all people who practice Islam. And there is that component. There's also the consideration that this is not a religious based thing, right? Every single one of the Abrahamic faiths at some point has had an era like we are seeing right now in Islam, right? It's not something that is unique to Islam at all. But right now it happens that the rest of, like, a large part of the world is not there anymore, and Islam is. And so we are rightfully calling out oppression and danger and violence and religiously motivated bigotry and all of this that should be called out 100%. But the only difference is in where we are in the timeline, right? If we go back 2,000 years or 1,000 years into like the Crusades period, people would be calling out Christians for exactly the same thing. So I think that's the crux of this, is we need to get away from assuming that it's because of a group of people or it's because of an inherently bad uniquely bad religious viewpoint, as opposed to, hey, every single one of these Abrahamic faiths, and many faiths, in fact, have experienced this kind of unacceptable reactivity to other worldviews. And right now, that is Islam, or some versions of Islam. And in the future,
some versions of Christianity.
Right. And
we've got our own...
that's the other side of it. Yeah. So what Sam Harris fails to do is remove his own biases before talking, which is ironic because that's what he assumes Christians do, and he is exempt from because he is no longer a Christian, which is stupid. He does not see...
It is bailiwick that he is meditation. I think he either knows that he's being partially dishonest maybe as an edgelord for the clicks, or if he's truly as blind as he is. It's rather ironic, given that his bailiwick is talking about the clarity that the meditation he does gives him.
Yeah, and you can have some forms of clarity and be completely obtuse in other areas, right? So he may indeed find clarity here, but that doesn't translate clearly to his understanding of world religions and the harm that Christianity is still doing more covertly, less out there.
So can I jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys are bringing up a lot of valid concerns, but without context and without understanding where those lines are, I think that this gets lost. So for the Sam Harris stans, who I see you. I kind of want to provide a backboard against which your comments can stand out.
Yeah.
So first, Sam Harris was incredibly useful and incredibly, I think, especially at the time, really did a lot of work to help deconvert people. Heck, some of his books have helped a whole lot of people. So these criticisms do not negate that. A lot of people go, oh, well, why are you so angry? Somebody in the comments said, can you give an example about his dishonesty? Here's the thing. Where I get upset with Sam Harris is there have been times when he's talked about Islam that are absolutely valid, in the same ways that he's talked about other religions, saying, hey, there's promotion of violence, there's promotion of just horrible behavior, and it should be called out. Perfect. That's good.
Bad idea.
We don't have an issue with that. What we have an issue with is when he slips up and he says, he makes comments about the people.
Right. Profiling in airports is okay because...
Yeah. When you mistake people and ideas, that's where you get into real issues, because people are not their ideas. They can change their ideas. And because of that, when you attack the people, you don't give them the opportunity to reflect or grow. You've pigeonholed them in a way that's just not fair. And so if somebody wants to know where an example of that dishonesty is, it's in confusing the idea with the people, because the idea should be attacked. And we're not upset with Sam Harris about that. It's the people.
Also, he has given a one side. I wouldn't want to defend Islam, but I would like to say that a more holistic reading of Islam includes things like Rumi's Analects, gay, reincarnationist, ecstatic Islamic saint, which characterized a huge body of Islamic culture for 1,000 years. And
I'll leave it to the apologists to kind of toot their horns. But I get what you're saying.
I'm just saying it's not as even though the book is as bound as all the other Abrahamic faiths to this strict dogmatism, how people interpret that has not been this one-sided. Islam is the worst idea ever. I think it has a lot of bad ideas in it, just like many faiths, if not all faiths,
Right, exactly. And I think that's also where Sam Harris falls into this kind of echo chamber. If you've read Letter to a Christian Nation, I forced myself through it the other week, and you will see a very distinctive shift, because when he talks about Christian violence in the U.S., he talks in ways that say, guys, this isn't right. You're not really Christians if you do this stuff, right? You should be loving and compassionate. This isn't correct. So he invalidates the faith of Christians who are violent, and yet when he talks about Islam, he equates violence with the ultimate practice of the faith. And so he does this thing where he gives Christians the out. Oh, guys, that's not really what you're doing. You're not really saying that. But with Muslims, if they are in any way violent, he's like, oh, see, they are practicing their faith explicitly. It's like, no, clearly there is a dissonance here that he is either unaware of, which is the generous reading, or he has found gets him more attention.
Which is the ungenerous reading.
Which is the uncharitable one, but frankly, given the people he associates with these days, feels more accurate. Anyway, David, this could go on forever and ever. I would love to continue this conversation, but absolutely continue reading other atheist thinkers and continue thinking about these things critically and in ways that build on the ideas instead of, keep them in this dogmatic state. So good job so far, and thank you for calling in.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah, and especially, I kind of want to just add one extra little bit, and that is, people can be good in their area of expertise, just not when they're not in their area of expertise. With Sam Harris, if Sam Harris wants to talk about morality and ethics, I want to listen. Yeah. Because he's had some really good points about morality and ethics. But when it comes to politics and race in America and that kind of stuff, I'm not there. So just make sure that we're.
I feel like there's a lot of overlap between those disciplines, though.
So I'm specifically talking about
the philosophy of
his book. It is, I'm blanking out on it, The Moral Landscape, and that had a lot of it had a huge impact on my understanding of how morality,
Yeah. And I see some people asking, is Letter to a Christian Nation worth a read? It is, but not for the reason you think. I did not realize until reading this book how many of our mic drop gotchas we were talking about earlier. Which God? Well, what about this? Well, how about that argument? Are directly pulled verbatim from that book. And it was actually very startling to me to realize that I had been regurgitating Sam Harris talking points without realizing that that's where they came from, because it was just kind of wrote in the atheist community, at least the ones that do YouTube. So definitely worth a read, but only to like kind of identify where you might be falling into that as well.
Yeah,
and
it was worth a read in like 2005, 2008.
I think it was 2012 or 14-ish, but
that it was written.
Hey,
God.
and hey, yeah, I agree with the live chat, Sam. If you want to call the show, you absolutely should. Like, I would love to talk with you.
But in the meantime,
while we wait for Sam Harris to call in, let's talk to Nick in Tennessee.
All right.
Nick wants to talk about hope and if things are going to ever get better, which is an interesting topic this week. Nick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hey, how's it going?
It's going okay. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thought since I called in a couple of weeks ago to ruin the idea of love, I could follow it up this week with ruining the idea of hope.
Oh,
Love
no.
Let's, honestly, the only one that's left is what? Charity? And then we've got faith over charity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you see the thumbnail for the last time you called in? Atheist destroys the concept of love or something like that?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Anyway.
Oh, my gosh.
What do you got?
Nick, what's up?
So I was talking with a friend who is a theist, and she tends to be more pessimistic than I am. I tend to be more optimistic. And as an atheist myself, I place a lot of stock in science, progress, society, moving forward, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm of the mindset that over time, our society, our culture, our world is effectively going to get better as we work together more effectively and develop technologies and resources that enable that.
Sure.
Whereas she thinks that the technologies, the advancements, a lot of that, are being used by corrupt, wicked, evil people to get away with what they want to do, kind of in secret and stuff like that. So I guess we just have kind of opposing views on things, and it made me wonder, like, is there a good reason to think that the world is getting either better or worse? And if so, what is it and why?
Eric, you want to take this one?
Sure, absolutely. There are so many different places to go. I think what's first is kind of an understanding of what the social contract is and how we as a social species have gotten here. We as a social species have gotten here because we're wired for a lot of different things that coincide with the social behavior that we see today, right? It has helped us survive. And so when it gets to, a baseline, there are things like charity and equity that we, see capuchin monkeys display, so the idea that charity and equity would somehow go out the window is bogus. There are uncharitable and not equitable people out there, but they are in the minority. How do I know? Because we're in a functioning society. We can say it's dysfunctional, and we can say that we have a lot of work to get to the ideal world that we want to live in. But we are in a pretty advanced civilization. So moving forward from that, now we cannot expect that evolution is going to, trigger warning, that evolution is going to prevent things like rape. We have not evolved against that, but our social contract has, for the most part.
Yeah, this episode's not getting monetized.
Well, I mean, and so when it comes to our social mores, we create laws to enforce those pieces of the social contract that we value. I feel like the world that we're in is evidence of the growth that we've been making to a better tomorrow for generations. And so to see it getting worse would be against the trend that we've seen for hundreds of years. That, I mean,
I disagree.
go back 100 years and tell me if you still disagree. Go back 100 years before that and tell me if you disagree. Go back 1,000 years and tell me how things were, and then tell me whether or not you disagree. We are growing as a society. You can point out issues that you think are important, but in 100 years from now, there will be other issues that people are going to think is important, and that's going to be the growth that they make.
That's fair. That's fair. I do think, though, that we fall into a dangerous idea when we think about the idea of linear progress, or this concept that, oh, don't worry, in 100 years things are going to be better in general, because that leads us to be lax in what we defend. 100 years ago, it was very difficult for people to get reproductive health care. That is returning. That's not something that is getting better, at least here. 100 years ago, it was a lot safer for trans people to be in the closet or live in groups that were explicitly, deviant, quote unquote. And that's still the case. Not as much, but there are efforts to make it that way again. So there's a concern for me in this idea that, yes, in general, we are better off. We have better medicine. We have better technology. We have better methods of communicating with each other. That is true. But the idea that the arc of history bends towards justice, unfortunately, puts the emphasis on some external force for good as opposed to the increased and maintained vigilance of individuals.
Could we shift that instead of saying that the arc of history bends towards justice? We say that the arc of history bends towards progress.
I don't think so. No, I disagree with that.
Well, I hope that in 100 years this video gets uncovered and you are proven to be wrong.
I hope so too, Eric. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think in regards to that last thought, it kind of comes down to how you define progress, right? Like a deeply fundamentally religious person would define progress as returning to what they perceive to be God's ideal version of our world, which to a lot of us non-religious people would be regress.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a question of like what direction will our society decide to take? And in recent years, we've seen the divisiveness kind of cropping up between political factions, religious factions, just different groups are getting more argumentative and conflicting with one another more, it seems. And so I guess that's a big portion of why we were kind of having these different views, because I'm looking at like, yeah, the science, the tech, it's all getting better. And she's like, yeah, but people aren't being nice to each other. People are more prone to be mean, to be separate, to be...
But if you were to plant her in the middle of, Alabama during the civil rights movement, do you think that...
Okay, so
I
think it's possible that the world has gotten better, but could get worse again. Like we could have reached to the apex and be on the downswing. I don't think that's the case, but I think it's possible.
I think we just build more and more complex social mores. I imagine in 300 years, people are going to look back and have an answer for veganism, and they're going to see us all as monsters. Or that
probably,
yeah, right, or that here's an easy one. How immoral is it that we all drive in cars that don't drive themselves? How terrifying would that be for somebody to just get in a several ton metal box and just go 70, 80, 100 miles an hour? It's just mind-blowing. Like I think that we just build and grow them, but not every step is a step forward. But if we look at V put it very well, the arc of history
That wasn't me. I wish I could take credit for that one. Pretty sure that was Martin Luther King.
I'm not saying that you came up with it. I'm saying that you gave that example, and that's a very good way of putting that. That the arc of history has bent towards progress.
I don't know. I think that a large part of the reason we think we are so progressive now is because we don't know what people beyond what, we would consider the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages. Like, there are whole studies of societies that were a lot more socially progressive than we are now, like way back then. So like there is also, we have to take into consideration the fact that we are the ones writing the history. We are the ones saying, wow, look at how progressive we are. Look how much we've done. And yeah, that makes us feel good.
I entirely disagree. You would have these very progressive societies when the tribe is much, much, much smaller. We come across...
There was an entire region, the Fertile Crescent in Africa, before like 3000 BCE, was exceedingly more progressive. And what happened was I believe it was the Indo-Europeans up north came down to the south and conquered them and instituted what would become versions of the Abrahamic faith. And literally, like, there are entire civilizations that have made so much progress, not in all ways, granted, but in ways that we are still trying to achieve today. So I think there's a lot more nuance here than just saying, yes, everything is going to get better. I also do want to...
Hold on. No, I disagree with your example. I absolutely disagree with your example, and I want to push back before we move forward. If we want to talk about Rome was a huge empire, right? Mm-hmm. It did not reach out to the empires that were being built in the Far East. It did not reach out to the huge, indigenous people groups in North and South America. And all of those different groups, right, where it's a matter of scale. I think that it's easier when you have a smaller tribe to have that growth. As the tribe grows, more and more disparate opinions come in. And because of that, yeah, we're fighting it. But I wouldn't use that as an example the way that you used it, because I don't think that is I don't think it's a valid comparison.
Interesting. Well, we can definitely talk more about this. I do want to address one more thing, Nick, that your friend said, or that you've said your friend said about people aren't being nice, right?
Yes.
And this concept that in order for progress to happen, people must be nice to each other. And I think that that's very dangerous too, because I don't think that's accurate. I think that what we need to be focusing on is how to stop the people who are never going to be nice to other people from harming those people. We're never going to get to a Star Trek society where everybody is kind and ethical and humanist, right? That's not going to happen. And if we think that that's the way forward, I think we're going to get stuck. What we need to be doing is making sure that the people who we elect into office, the people who we give power in our communities, are kind people, are humanists, are people who see the worth and the value in others. And that is how we move forward. We don't have to worry about everyone being nice to each other, because it's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that we can't make progress in spite of it.
That's a good point.
So that was intense and a lot more lively than I was expecting it to get. But Nick, thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care.
Yeah, have a good show.
I didn't drop him. I just did the thing. Okay.
You have to click both the buttons.
I love when we don't agree about things. For some reason, it's fun for me.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's indicative of the fact that we both have healthy intellectual lives outside of the echo chamber of our relationship. All right, let's talk with Joe in Kansas.
Ooh.
Joe is a theist who wants our opinions on progressive churches, which is interesting. I'm excited. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hi, Eric. Hi.
Hello.
Hey, what's up today?
This is actually a question I was kind of wrestling with the last couple days. I'm not trying to stir the pot too much, but it was just a matter of like, is this an interesting topic? It's just ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And progressive churches, I mean, the ones that try to be as progressive as they can, who support, who support gay marriage, who are maybe even pro-choice, as progressive as you would think a church would be by modern standards.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've just seen over the years in the atheist community is, accusations of, if someone says, the Bible is so perfect, then someone will say, it supports slavery, and then the person has to, well, not that part, so,
right.
Cherry picking. But it's always, I almost feel like certain parts of the secular community, the atheist community, do the atheist version of the no true Scotsman fallacy, because, if we're holding everyone to the standard of, if you're a Christian, then you believe in the Bible, then that means the only Christians are, the Westboro
Liberal.
Baptist Church,
Yeah.
and Stephen Anderson and those kind of people.
Yep.
So
You're absolutely right. It's building a straw man, and I've seen so many atheists do that it's just cringy, because
yeah, and
go ahead.
And the thing I kind of wonder at regarding some of that is, how come that isn't applied to, when people fall into that hole, how come that isn't applied then to almost every religious person ever? Because I think almost in regards to Martin Luther King, who's presented as this great admirable public figure, says helped immeasurably with everything in regards to civil rights, and says, but he was a pastor. So I would hope that no one would think, because Martin Luther King was a Christian, he also supported slavery,
Right. And honestly,
just such a strange.
There's also this really
disconnect.
weird attempt to be like, oh, well, Martin Luther King Jr. was a reverend, but actually he was an atheist. And so that's why he was.
Yes, I've heard that kind of stuff too.
And it's not helpful, and it makes the world very flat in a way that is not helpful and doesn't represent reality. I think that I try my best to avoid that whenever possible. I know I did it in the past. When I first came out of religion myself, I was very angry, and I also wasn't as educated, and I wasn't in a place emotionally to listen to other religious groups saying, hey, that is a misrepresentation, because in my experience, the only people saying that were people from my church, my community, who were using that excuse to, redirect blame away from themselves when it should have lived with them. So I think that there is a time and a place for atheists who especially deconvert to be angry. And yeah, that's going to result a lot of the time in straw manning, in big over-the-top arguments, in hyperbole, in things that are not helpful and not nuanced in the way that the world actually is. And while we should be guarding against that, I totally get that that's where a lot of people start. That's where I started. What we need to do, however, is we need to make sure that as we calm the fuck down, which we should do eventually, we start opening ourselves up to learning more and to being challenged, because it's very comfortable to think that everybody who's an atheist is automatically a humanist and a skeptic, and that, there's a lot of us and therefore we are going to be okay, and religion is not going to influence us in the ways that it used to. That's very comforting, but that's not accurate. And trying to paint the world in that way ends up with a lot of people being thrown under the bus, like progressive Christians. And it also results in a lot of people being given platforms who don't actually embody humanism or skepticism simply because they have the label of atheist.
Right.
Actually, yes.
Wow, this is just the episode where Eric disagrees with me.
No, I actually entirely agree. I just wanted to make sure that it was a yes and not a but, because this is not a disagreement. But what it often tells me about someone who does that, right? Who goes, well, here's an inconsistency in your Bible. This is why it can't possibly be true, is because what it tells me is that might be the last straw or the first that got them thinking, that got them to deconvert. You know, a lot of people come from churches where they believe that the Bible is infallible. Every word is perfect and correct and cannot, by their definition, be wrong. And so when you have tiny inconsistencies, I was thinking about the story of Jairus and how Jairus's daughter died and was brought back to life by Jesus in the New Testament. And in one telling, Jairus's daughter was resurrected. He had left and his daughter died while he was gone. And while he was out with Jesus, somebody gave the news saying, sorry, your daughter died. And then in another version, his daughter died, and he then left to go see Jesus. For someone who's watching, who cares, right? But if you think that the infallible word of God, you have to come up against the fact that those two things cannot exist together at the same time. And a piece like that may be minuscule, nothing to somebody outside of that faith tradition. But if you come from that faith tradition, it can be world-shattering. And so I think that a lot of people will take that and apply what was world-shattering in their worldview and think that that's true for everyone, when that's not the case. And so it's, again, an example of people thinking that there's a silver bullet, one argument that's going to convince everyone, when the fact is, because there are so many different faith traditions, because there are so many ways of explaining different things, when you have a Protestant shift from Catholicism, when you have, so many different hermeneutics and apologetics that you can use to justify different things that you don't like in the Bible, you have to meet them where they are. So, yeah, V, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just laying out that it might not help. Well, it usually won't help in the argument that atheist is having, but it does tell me a good bit about maybe where that atheist came from, because if they think the infallible thing is so important, maybe at one point they were taught that it is infallible. So that's all I have to add.
Joe, what are your thoughts?
Do you have an hour and a half?
Well, we did at the beginning of the show. Yeah, I think that you're asking a good question, and what we want to do is make sure that we are holding our side, quote unquote, as accountable as we hold other people, right? We don't want to fall into groupthink. We don't want to fall into, well, it's a bad argument, but it was made for the right reasons, so that makes it okay. It's not okay to use that argument for good reasons, because everyone thinks they have good reasons, and that just means that everyone is going to be using bad arguments, and we're not going to get anywhere. So absolutely, I'm happy to hold the atheist side of things to a high standard. And the only thing that I ask of religious people or theistic people is that they do the same.
Yeah, I would agree.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Joe. We really appreciate hearing from you again.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Yeah. I know it's not slamming and yelling and this and that, but I feel like we get so much further when we have that empathy. But anyway.
Yeah. Who would you like to take next?
Well, I think that I want to talk to Theresa in Germany.
Perfect. Let's talk to Theresa in Germany.
Theresa, wie geht's?
Hallo, mir geht's gut.
Good.
Theresa, you're calling in to talk about the appeal to nature fallacy and how that connects design, like intelligent design and creationism, with alternative medicine. That sounds really interesting. Give us your thoughts.
So a bit of background on me first, so that you understand where I'm coming from. I'm a pharmacy university student right now, and I'm trying to understand the other side of things to better argue for medical use, for like standard therapy. And a lot of people, when it comes to, well, the alternatives, use the appeal to nature fallacy. So they say, oh, I would rather use this, I don't know, essential oil or whatever because it's natural, so it must be better somehow.
Right.
And I feel like this doesn't make any sense unless you feel like the world has been designed for it. Because it's not like the plant had you in mind when it made the substances.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, Theresa. I've never thought about that particular connection, but I can totally see that. And especially because, at least here in the States, we do have a lot of Christians, evangelical Christians, young earth creationists, who gravitate specifically towards things like essential oils because it ties very much into that worldview.
Yes, yes. I'm so happy that you agree with me on that.
I think it's a really insightful point.
Yeah, I really don't know how to add to that. You're right. If somebody says it's natural, my first reaction is there are lots of natural poisons. And they just kind of roll their eyes. But making that connection that people think that there is a created world that maybe has secretly hidden cures, just kind of like Easter eggs all over.
Well, kind of it does. You just have to go find them and then make them into things that help you.
Well, like everything isn't willow bark, right? Everything isn't, a natural pain reliever or a natural antiseptic. Not everything is a natural antibiotic.
The interesting thing, though, is that a lot of like really potent substances that are plant derived don't get the label "it's natural, so it's good." Mm-hmm. I mean, morphine, perfect example for this. Nobody's taking morphine thinking, oh yeah, this is totally natural and like mild or something.
Or aspirin.
Right.
Or, yeah.
I remember, and there's a point to be made here about what we consider to be natural, which is technically like everything, really. Like somebody tried to, like, it was like an anti-vax gotcha where they listed the chemical components of an apple and were like, this is what's in the vaccine. I'm never getting it because of these. Would you put these chemical components in your body? And they were like, no, never. They're like, ha, that's an apple. So like you can talk about what natural even means in this case, but using the definition that you brought to us, Theresa, I think that you're correct there.
Yeah. It's really difficult to argue with people like that, though. I have a very hard time convincing people like that some of these are dangerous to use if not used properly. Mm-hmm. Essential oils is a perfect example for this. I mean, it's horrifying how creative people can get when it comes to using essential oils.
Horrifying creativity. I like the phrase. That's fun. Yeah, Theresa, thank you so much for doing what you're doing and getting a degree in this. It's really important right now to be educating yourself in these topics and thinking about things in this critical, skeptical way. So, yeah, thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
All right.
Keep up the good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, who are we talking to next?
All right, so I think that we've got someone in the screening room that I really want to talk to, but Ray from England did call back. They had a previous call with us, and I'd like to talk with them.
Okay, sure.
Ray, you are calling about the ethics of military conscription, which, oh boy, is a whole topic this week. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Yeah, what's your question?
So, Yeah, this week the subject has come up again as both sides in the recent conflict have conscription now. I have a number of issues with it in general. Not the specific conflict, it's complicated, but in a general sense. One thing, I hate the term draft dodger. It's really disgusting to me, and I can't stand the fact that some liberals used it, for example, against Donald Trump, who I hate. I don't think anyone hates Donald Trump more than I do, except maybe Melania, and yet I defended Donald Trump when people called him a draft dodger, because I think it's like, the best analogy I can think of is if people were to say, I'm not going to get you demonetized, someone who is pregnant, if you were to call that person a cowardly birth dodger for not giving birth, for not sacrificing their body for someone else's, it would be like that. I don't know why people don't say that, but they do say draft dodger for some reason, and I feel like it's, in both cases, it's like you're saying this is your role as a human because you're born with this sex. Your role is either to have children or your role is to sacrifice your safety and well-being for other people who matter more than you do. Like, I feel like little boys are raised, even with Disney cartoons, to feel like their role in life is to come in and save the woman at the end. And women are raised to think their role is to be a parent. And both people can do both. Anyone can do those things if they choose to. But so there's the sexism angle, which I hate. The fact that it's AMAB only, usually. I hate that. But even if it was everyone, even if we got rid of that and everyone was conscripted, I still think it's like human sacrifice. Israel. I think I would only volunteer in a war, and I would fight for my country if it needed me. But not if they were conscripting people. The moment I was in an army that was conscripting people against their will, I would quit and say, you have to put me in jail, because I'm not fighting to keep other people in military enslavement. That's not freedom. I'm not fighting for freedom at that point. I'm now fighting for tyranny.
I think it's more complex than that. I mean, I agree with your greater points, but at the same time, you know, if we break it down smaller, you know, would you die for people close to you, right? Would you fight and die for those people close to you? A lot of people would say yes. I wouldn't blame the people who said no, but you know, if you grow that out to your town, your city, your country, I think that it's a lot more complex. But the idea of conscripting, and even when there's not conscription, social pressure and shaming towards military service is an interesting, awful, and yet big part of our history. I was recently watching a program about the White Feather Society. The White Feather Society, there were groups of young women that would find military-age men and give them a white feather to put in their coat pocket. Okay. Which symbolized that they're a chicken. Because they should be out fighting.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. But then again, if you're fighting against tyranny, and the tyranny is being used to prop up the fight, I feel like it's just really, really complex.
I think that one thing we can do when looking at these militaries that are either drafted or conscripted is look at who makes up that demographic, right? And is it people who have the option to not do this, right? So in the US, young kids are not forcibly taken, but are given just about every possible incentive between money and education and a way out of maybe a bad living situation. They are preyed upon by recruiters who say, hey, if you join the military, you get all of these things. Don't you hate your life right now? Don't you wish that things were different? And that's a problem.
Elvis Costello has a song all about that.
Yeah. And then people who are actively, you know, in the Ukraine, it is illegal for anyone between the ages of, I believe, 18 and 50 to leave the country. And while I obviously am in support of Ukraine in this conflict, that is a problem in and of itself, in the same way that it's a problem that there are poor little Russian boys who are 18 years old broke, poor, who don't have a choice but to go there, and they are wandering around without food right now because they don't have any kind of leadership or any desire to be there themselves. So, yeah, I think that the idea of conscription is something that is passed off as patriotic, and to question it feels unpatriotic. But I think that with a modern humanist understanding of autonomy and what you should be expected to do with your body or not, it's going to have to come up in public conversation a lot more than it has in the past. So that's my 2 cents. Ray, this is a huge topic and definitely something that I know that it's been on my mind as well.
There are vets in the comments who have very, very strong thoughts. There are, what's amazing is we have an audience that's all over the world. Mm-hmm. And I feel like without their voices we can't paint a clear enough picture, and it's frustrating, but at the same time recognizing that maybe can help us temper things.
Yeah, absolutely. There are many perspectives, and I am certainly not saying that the people who did choose to be in the military, either here or elsewhere, and made that decision for themselves, that it was a bad decision or that they shouldn't have made it. I'm just saying if you are able to make the decision, then that is a privilege that some people did not get. Ray, thank you for calling in. I know we have to move on, but this is huge and timely, and I appreciate getting an opportunity to talk about it with you.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Heavy topics today, man.
It is, and I am just not qualified. I am so not qualified to talk about conscription into military service. That is not... Who the hell am I? I never served in the military. Yeah, I submitted my draft stuff when I turned 18 because that's something you need to do in the United States. But who the...
Honestly, and this is... I do want to make sure that this is explicit as well, which is exactly what you said earlier. One of our unspoken rules is, hey, we're going to talk about this to the extent that we understand it, but we are never talking for more people than ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. I am never making a case for anybody but me. And B, if we get stuff wrong, we want to know about it and we want to be told that, and then we're going to backtrack on air, either in the episode or the next episode. We will address it if we get something very wrong. So if you see us say stupid stuff, let us know, and we will see if if you're correct about that. We will go and do more research. But yeah.
Yeah, I know.
All right. I know that Wolfos was talking about calling in on the live chat and has done so. So I would love to talk to Wolfos in Texas.
Yeah. So I will often see people in the live chat who are like, I wonder if it's too late to call. I'm a religious person. Yes. Call in. We want to talk to you. Yeah. Anyway. Hi, Wolfos.
Hey, guys.
Hey, you are one of our recurring callers, which is wonderful. And today you want to talk about marriage between an atheist and a religious person?
Yes, I've been married for 13 years to a very devout Christian. I'm an atheist. I didn't start the religion even knowing that she was Christian. She didn't know my religion or anything. And we've had a wonderful relationship for a long time. We've had children we're raising together. And I've heard just recently, I've started hearing about during apologetic arguments about that not being okay. And I'm confused on why that wouldn't be okay.
Because you're not equally yoked. Sorry, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, depending on who you ask, that has a lot of different answers, unfortunately. I love the fact that you guys have managed to find a beautiful relationship, even though you do disagree on this topic. I think that means you're both mature adults who can, hold each other accountable and also have your own spiritual and or intellectual lives. It's great. A lot of apologists and pastors and preachers tend to be shy about this because a lot of the time what ends up happening is the religious person ends up deconverting. That doesn't happen all the time. Obviously, in your case, it hasn't. A big fear is that being with an atheist in any capacity, whether that's as a good friend, whether that's as a coworker or a boss or a relationship, will humanize that other person and put that religious person in touch with arguments that may hurt their faith. So in my experience, that's how that's always been framed to me. And in doing some digging, that's what I've found myself. Does that sound like it's accurate in terms of what you've been hearing?
Well, yeah, mostly, and from her view, she invites me to go to church all the time. I've met all of her churchgoers and everybody because I knew they were going to be around my family. And they've all invited. They're nothing but kind and whatnot. They're a wonderful church, but they're non-denominational, so they're not pushing any agenda, it seems like. So she comes home and does self-studying, and we get along pretty well. We got married when we were 19 and 20, and we've been able to hold it together as an atheist and a Christian for a long time without actually having any serious problems that messed it up. And I've never wanted to shake her foundation because she seems happier being in that community than outside of it.
Yeah. I mean, that just shows that your priorities are, compatible. I think that a lot of times, especially kind of in the specific community that we're in, we're surrounded by a lot of atheists who their non-belief is really, really important to them. It's one of the biggest things to them. And because of that, they prioritize that over that kind of compatibility that you do. And because of that, we don't get a lot of moderate people who make those, compromises and concessions in their life with their loved ones. And it's awesome that you do.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Wolfos.
Well, I've realized that she's changed her opinions about a lot of things in society because she was raised in a very Christian household, so she was shielded a lot. And being around me, I refuse to sugarcoat things that are actually going on in the world with, like in our school system, stuff that's been happening here in Texas. And her being a teacher, she's noticed a lot more now.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of stuff being pushed from the wrong angles toward children.
Yeah. And I think that is huge in and of itself. So I think that there is a place and a time for people to have their intellectual sparring matches and to break down arguments with a religious person. That is an option. And it's one that I enjoy doing. But there is that other side of it, which is getting into relationships with these people, romantically or not, and actively building up that person and allowing them to explore their world in a way that is not being judged and not being, should or shouldn'ted at them, which is huge. And so for me, what I would want to say to you is, obviously, you're not listening to the apologists who are saying that this marriage shouldn't be able to work because she is a Christian and will be led astray, right? But also, I don't want you to ever feel pressure from the atheist side or the non-believing side of things for being in that relationship or for finding so much value or for not, using her as a mission field in your way and shaking those foundations, right? The thing that we are against more than anything else is indoctrination and evangelizing, regardless of who is doing that to whom, right? The fact that you are respecting her personal boundaries is huge. And it means that you're putting the person above the idea, which is humanism, which is what we love.
Yeah. I read a comment and it's just been kind of sticking in my maw. Somebody said I couldn't be with someone who has an anti-human foundation. But that goes back to what we've been talking about all episode, and that's a straw man. Obviously, Wolfos's marriage is one where they are putting each other, these humans, at the foundation of of the life that they're building together. And just because someone is religious doesn't mean that they're anti-human.
No.
And it doesn't mean that their foundations are anti-human. What it means is that their religion is what their religion is. But when you make that kind of assumption, you lose so much, and that includes the happiness of the person that we're talking to. So, come on, comment section, do better.
We focus most of our time on empathy with us raising our children and treating everybody around us how we would actually want to be treated. And she sees that I come to that conclusion without using religion whatsoever. And she comes to that with washing away sin, but she still comes to that conclusion regardless.
Yeah.
And if that's where it leads to, I'm okay with it. As soon as it becomes hateful, I point it out. Because I've moved her forward on under her understanding of gay rights and trans rights that are coming up right now, and tried to explain it to her like civil rights were a thing, women's rights were a thing. If we keep progressing like this, we can all be on the same level, regardless of what the religion is.
Yeah.
And then we'll just need to find something new to do a show about.
Yeah.
That is okay.
All right, Wolfos, thank you for calling in, and say hi to your wife for us.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. You have a wonderful day.
You too.
I love that we get representation of moderates, because
you
lose sight of the fact that most people are in between somewhere, that, religion is not the most important thing in everyone's lives. And the fact that they're able to, find that common ground and build a happy life together, good for them.
Honestly, some of the people that I admire most in my online activist sphere are Christian. And that is something that I did not think would be the case back when I deconverted. But more and more, that moderate position there, I think, is the way to go.
I don't know if it's necessarily the way to go, but
well, you don't all have to marry Christians.
Yeah,
but
I mean, and if this is the most important thing in your life, and that's a no-no for you, that is okay. It is valid, and we're good there. That was true for me. I was with somebody from 19 until 29, and we grew apart. I lost my faith. They were Catholic, and after there's a whole, well, you know my story. You're marrying me.
Wait, you were with someone for that? What? I'm lying.
After 7.5 years, I said, I don't believe. And they said, I can't believe I wasted 7.5 years with you. And then I was with them for another 2.5.
Yeah.
So the idea that that's wrong is not necessarily true, but just recognizing that it's not so polarized is just really nice for context,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we need to talk to Luke in Canada, because
we do.
Luke.
Hello. How are you doing?
We are doing good. I'm excited.
It's been a while.
With you. Yeah.
We talked once about the Kalam agreements together.
Oh.
And today I called back because I had nothing else to do. So.
Well, we're happy.
And I was listening to your show.
Yeah. What's your question today?
Yeah, the question was about your greatest arguments against the existence of God. What could you tell us? Oh, by the way, I'm a Catholic. I'm a Christian.
Okay.
So I'm a theist. So I was wondering, what is your greatest arguments against the existence of God, particularly the Catholic one?
Ooh.
Greatest argument against the existence of God. I don't have one.
I got a couple. That could be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I'm going to give this to Eric because I don't have one.
Okay. So,
cool.
So, Luke, if you can imagine just any possible universe where, any combination of things could be in it, could there exist a universe where there is no God? Could there be a naturalistic universe just in any possible universe?
Yes. No, I understand what you're asking, but such a universe without a God will have some kind of creator that I would name God. So
Well, if let's say there's a cosmic fluctuation. I'm just pulling words out of my butt here. So those those people whose this is their profession, please forgive me. But I'm just going to say cosmic fluctuation because I'm ignorant. So let's say due to some cosmic fluctuation, a universe comes into existence. Would that be the creator then for that?
So this fluctuation, does it have a will?
Well, if it's just a happenstance, then no. That would be just like asking a rock that rolled down a hill whether or not it had a will.
Okay, so no, it wouldn't be God. The will is needed for God to be.
Okay, so I kind of want to get back to the question: is there any possible universe? Could there be a possible universe without a God in it?
No, in the sense that you would need someone or something with a will to create this universe that you are in. It might not be a god. It might be an alien that creates your universe and living in another universe kind of thing. But you would still need a creator first, guy who created this alien kind of thing.
So I was going to go in one direction and give you an ontological argument against the existence of God, but you gave more information. And I think that to answer your question that you called in about, the most potent argument against the existence of God is the one that works with the person that you're talking to. So listening and engaging where that person is going to give you your strongest argument. Luke, you said that there needs to be will for a universe to become instantiated. I don't know how
to create or to exist.
What was that word?
Instantiation of the universe. Right? So
start.
Yeah, so the
to
beginning
start
of the
something,
universe,
you need will.
Okay, how did you come to that conclusion? Because we've only really had one universe that we've been able to inspect, which is ours, and I don't know how you could possibly come to the conclusion that will was necessary for it. And so how you're extrapolating that to all possible universes needing will is really confusing to me.
I have yet to discover that the universe has will. The universe itself has a will. I have yet to discover that. If I were to discover that universe has a will, then my statement that a will is needed to start the universe is false. But if the universe doesn't have a will, it still needs something that has a will to start it. Like my coffee cup, for example, doesn't have a will. If I want my coffee cup to move, it will need a will somewhere, some place to move the coffee cup.
Okay, but that flies in the face of the world that we live in. There are lots of things, like if a tree falls in the forest, does there need to be will for that tree to have fallen? When grass grows, does there need to be will for the grass to grow? When natural things interact in the world around us, most of the time it's not will. It's like if you were to stand there at the beach and point at every grain of sand and say that it was will that was necessary for rocks to be, ground down into sand. Like, that's kind of wild.
Yeah, the sand or the wind or the natural things that you talk about, the chemical reactions, are the result of the will of God, in my worldview.
Okay.
It is the one who willed that gravity is 9.8 meters per second. That's his rules that he wrote down and then applied to what is the physical world. Like, you apply your will to the coffee cup, God applied his will to what we call gravity.
So let's take gravity in the cosmological constants and put them on a shelf and call back, because that is a topic that I've been wanting to have for 5 years, Luke. For 5 years.
I need to call back.
Luke, I've done this for 5 years, and I've been waiting for somebody to bring up the cosmological constants as proof of the existence of their God for exactly that. Please call back, because it's going to get us off on a rabbit trail. I'm not going to go into that. Luke, do me this favor, call back. But where I'm going to go with that is, it sounds like we're getting into a watchmaker argument, the argument from design.
Yeah.
So do you know what something looks like if it's not created? Because it sounds like you're standing on a beach that's made of watches, trying to identify whether or not a watch was created. If everything was created, then how can you tell whether something wasn't created?
Yeah, there are things that are created by humans and things that are not created by humans, that are created by God. So I know the difference between those two.
So everything is created.
Like you said, it's a rabbit hole. I understand that you don't have such a long time in front of you. That's why I called back with the same thing. And I understand that for you, yeah?
We have 10 Why did you call so late? What is wrong with you? We have 10 minutes. Did you do this on purpose?
Before.
You did this on purpose. Do you just not have... do we need to start the show later? Is that what's going on?
It wouldn't work. But if you want to, I will be able to talk with you on the Discord server after.
No! We want this on the show. I want people to hear it.
On the show?
Yeah!
I'm sorry, I can't. I couldn't before. I was eating and I wasn't able to talk with you guys. I was listening to you. It was interesting to listen to you.
Oh my gosh, Luke, you're killing Eric over here.
I can hear that.
Oh my goodness. No, seriously. This is, I love the way the question was framed. What is your strongest argument against God? I really, really, really want to get deeper into this, but we do not have too much time. So,
I know.
Eric, I know that it feels like you guys were kind of moving towards a point and then we got off topic. I want to make sure that gets through before we move on. Is there anything else that either of you want to bring up there?
Well, Luke, I'm going to give you the last word, okay? So I'll go and then I'll give you the last chance to respond. I feel like that's the most fair I could be. The place that I would want to go and the place that I would put anybody in, who gives that argument to me is I would say, it sounds like you've defined yourself into a corner where there's no way out. Because if everything that's not created by man is created by God, then if you're using that to point back to that, evidence of a God by saying, it's basically just a more complicated version of look at the trees. And number one, it's not falsifiable. Number two, it's not convincing. It shouldn't be convincing for you. And, what I would push back on is I would want you to show me how I can test that claim. Or if you're just, giving us something that is impossible to work with. And then why is it convincing to you, right? There are so many places to go with that. But I know you don't have the time to respond to them all. We don't have the time to edit, but I want to give you the chance to respond before we move forward.
Yeah. The main thing is usually when I speak with atheists, I'm talking about the arguments I have for God instead of the arguments they have against God. Because usually what happens is what happened during our conversation. They ask me, what is your greatest argument against for the existence of God? And they push back on this argument. And I still have trouble having this kind of answer. In your view, what convinced you that there wasn't any God involved in your life?
Are you saying that you need to listen to the other person to have an effective conversation?
What about it? Yeah, that's crazy, right?
There's no silver bullet? Oh my goodness. We don't agree with each other, Luke, but we agree on that.
All right. Thank you very much for the conversation. I hope we'll get to talk together another time.
I agree. Thank you so much, Luke.
Bye-bye.
I wasn't being sarcastic at Luke, by the way, just at I mean, we were talking about it, right? We had a call earlier about people creating strawmen and attacking these strawmen. And it's like, yeah, if you think that you have this one shot that's going to convince everyone that a God does or doesn't exist, then you have not listened to the person that you're engaging with, because it takes that listening to understand what their definition of a God is or how they came to the conclusions they came to.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm going to have to do some more thinking, because I don't have a question, an argument against God. I don't have one that I keep in my back pocket. I don't have one that puts me, at ease at night that I repeat to myself, there's no God, there's no God, there's no God. But what convinced me was a lack of good arguments on the other side when I looked into it. So there is that, and I don't want that to, like, I know that feels like a cop-out to a lot of people because, well, there must have been something that clinched it. And the people who leave kind of get that there very rarely is like a thing.
No, it's a death by 1,000 cuts usually.
So I don't have one, but I'm willing to find one. Like if we want to have that conversation and we have the intent to shift that burden of proof and put the atheist stance on the spot, I think it's strong enough to hold up to it. But it would be dishonest for me to say that that's my, inherent thought process, right? Like I could do that for fun, but personally, I'm not going to say that I have an argument against God.
No, it always has to begin with a question, right? Do you believe that God is omnipotent?
Right.
Cool. Can God create a boulder so big he can't lift it? You don't think God is omnipotent? Then that's not going to work, is it? Find other things. John Klein says, V is the God of glasses. John, your comment about hermeneutics earlier killed me. I got off topic so bad I forgot what we were talking about.
Oh God.
No, got off topic so bad. Said something about Herman being nude, and now that's all I'm going to think about whenever I hear hermeneutics.
Oh my gosh. All right. Speaking of live chat, let's do some super chats.
Yeah.
And then wrap it up. Pet Rabbit, Petrobit, something that sounds like Petrobit, sent a gaspy emoji face and 99 cents. Thank you.
Amit Matthew sent $10. Thank you, Amit. Says, insert obnoxious comment.
Well,
oh, right. We said that at the beginning.
Yep. RG sent $7.99. Says, will Jesus ever command a whole school of 666 fish? If you guys want to see Jesus commanding 666 fish, then you should vote fish in the live chat.
I do not understand that at all. Oh, is that a...
Jesus commands the fish.
Oh, that's right.
There's a
that's
counter.
Right.
Nightbot has a counter.
So to do that, they put exclamation point and then fish in the live chat.
Yep.
Okay. Chimp3 sent $10 and says, make a Negroni live, shaken, not stirred.
Hey, we might make the drinks on air on Wednesday.
We could pick up some Campari on the way back from work.
I don't know. Campari is not my favorite flavor in a drink.
Then maybe not a Negroni.
Yeah, it's kind of Campari forward.
It really is. Yeah,
John Klein sent $10. Thank you, John. It says, regarding confusion, the Catholic Church of Russia has condemned the Ukraine's leadership as evil, but the Pope has called for humanitarian aid. Apparently, God is sending conflicting messages. Yeah, although it is worth pointing out that Eastern Orthodoxy is very historically split from Catholicism, and it could be part of the issue there. Well, maybe. I don't know. Talking out of my butt.
Moldred T. Malcontent sent $5 and says, I love and treasure individuals as I meet them. I loathe and despise the groups they identify with and belong to.
I mean, you can say that, but how are you parsing that when you're around more than one person? Do you hate them automatically?
I'm sure they meant it in the context of
the ideology as opposed to the people.
Yeah.
If that's fair, then. Blazing Wizard Pope sent 50. Is that Krona?
I think it's Kroner.
Jesus revealed himself to the world and became a legend. I revealed myself to the world, and all I got was a criminal record. Oh, that's funny.
Brian Zupke sent $20 and says, Eric and V, I've listened to you both for quite some time and wanted you to know I really appreciate your approach, communication style, and ideas. Please do keep up the great work.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. And those super chats are helping to make sure that we do put that to, keep it up.
Absolutely. Isaiah Diesel sent $5 and says, so happy to be a patron for the second month in a row now. Yay! I really do love listening to both of you. We seriously need more channels like this one. Thank you, Isaiah, and thank you for being a patron.
Yeah. By the way, for patrons, if you've become a patron this month, we don't remind people often enough, but if you are a $5 and up patron, you'll be thanked in the credits. You can tell us not to list your name if you don't want it, but we want to thank you in the credits. I update it once a month because there's too much fluctuation throughout the month. So next episode, there will be a March updated Patreon thing.
Oh my
so
God,
you
we're
should
going
be-
into March.
I know. So for those who've become patrons and are wondering, hey, how come my name's not in the credits? It will be updated next week.
All right.
Question of beams.
Queen of Beams.
Queen of beams. Where are my
Where did
glasses?
those other
I don't
letters
know.
come from?
It's too far away. It's way over there. There. Queen of Beams says, I'm contributing to help get V a new coffee cup. Their current one is way too small.
Cheers.
Oh no. You'll be able to bathe in it.
John, that is the plan eventually. John Austin sent $5 Canadian and says, I must have V's coffee cup. That will take a whole coffee pot in my RV. Yes. Guys, you better believe I'm doing the legwork to try and find where I can get ginormous SG mugs from.
V's been looking.
Well, we're looking for him.
Ooh, you know what? I get the opportunity. This reminds me, there was another comment in the live chat that I want to respond to. And it's not long enough for a rant, so I just want to say, people are saying, how come Eric and V are drinking water on the show? It's not like they're doing it for 10 hours. It's not a marathon. Why are they drinking water?
That was a comment?
Yes.
Someone's worried about the amount of water we're drinking? Why aren't you drinking water?
It's just confusing, and there are two reasons. Number one, the lights are hot, and I'm in a jacket, and I get hot. But more importantly, when I let my mouth get dry, it creates clicking sounds, and there's a lot of really not fun mouth sounds that happen when your mouth is dry. And so we are trained to take small sips so that we can hydrate our mouth so that we will sound better on the microphone.
Mm-hmm. Also, who says this is water?
V.
All right, you guys. Thank you so much for another episode. We will let you go, but we're excited to see you next week in March.
On Wednesday for Versus.
Oh, on Wednesday for Versus.
Yeah.
Also in March, though. So yeah, go check that out. Make sure you have that little notification bell hit. It's already live on our page, so you can make sure you're notified when we go live on Wednesday.
Until then,
We're glad we had
this talk.